Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Today, we're getting into the word would in English. Would is what we call a modal verb. Now, modal verbs are special because they express modality, which is the idea of expressing the speaker's attitude towards the likelihood or the necessity of an action. The word would itself can be quite complicated. It has multiple uses and can even trip up advanced English speakers. So in this video, we'll break down the 5 distinct ways that would is used. We'll explore how would can indicate hypothetical situations, past habits, polite requests, and more. Understanding these nuances of using the word would can really help English test takers on the Duolingo English Test. It's not only about knowing the rules, but it's about knowing how to apply them correctly. Using would properly can elevate your speaking and your writing, potentially boosting your scores on the Duolingo English Test. So let's take a look at the use of the word would so it can lead to more confident English communication. Let's start with the first use of the word would, expressing past habits that are no longer done. Take, for example, the sentence, "He would dance well when he was a child." Here, would indicates a past habit, something he used to do but no longer does. Similarly, "I would read a lot in my college days." In both cases, would is used with action verbs to denote past actions that were habitual but no longer performed. How do we know that we're using the word would properly in this context? Because we can replace the word would with used to. If the sentence still makes sense, then you're on the right track. But remember that the word would in this situation can only be used with action verbs and not with the verb be.
So as a past habit, a question that we could apply this to would be something like this. Talk about a hobby you had as a child that you really loved. A sample answer could be, "When I was a child, I used to play the piano every day after school. I would spend hours practicing different pieces and improving my skills. It was something I was really passionate about, and I would lose track of time whenever I sat down at the piano."
Now let's take a look at the second use of the word would. This can be a bit complicated, but in this situation, would, when reporting or paraphrasing someone else's words, also known as indirect speech. Let me clarify. Imagine somebody says directly, "The shop will be closed tomorrow." When we report this indirectly, we change the word will to would to reflect that the statement was made in the past. So it becomes, "The manager said that the shop would be closed tomorrow," because it's said indirectly by somebody else. Similarly, your mom may have said to you, "You will have a hard time in college." When this is reported indirectly, it is said as, "My mom said that I would have a hard time in college." The use of the word would in this situation helps us to accurately convey information from others, and it becomes essential when we want to communicate properly on the Duolingo English Test.
As the past of will in indirect speech, the question might show up like this. Discuss a recent announcement or plan you heard from someone else. Now we're using indirect speech as the past tense of will. Recently, my boss mentioned that there will be changes to our work schedule next month. She said that the office hours would be adjusted to accommodate some upcoming projects. It was important information for us to know, and I appreciated her keeping us informed about it.
Let's take a look at the third use of the word would, expressing choices or preferences using the expression would rather. In this context, would rather is used to indicate a preference for one option over another. For example, when someone says, "I would rather have coffee than tea," they're expressing their preference for coffee. Similarly, when someone says, "I would rather listen to music than watch TV," the speaker is stating their preference for listening to music.
Now used as preference. Share your experience between two leisure activities and explain why. As a sample answer, we could say, When it comes to leisure activities, I would prefer going for a hike in the mountains over spending the day at the beach. I enjoy the fresh air, scenic views, and the sense of adventure that hiking offers. Plus, I would rather be surrounded by nature and enjoy the tranquility of the mountains.
Keep in mind, if you like what you're hearing so far and you want to get more videos and updates, hit that notification button, subscribe, or even share it with a friend. That way you'll always be informed when new videos come up that we make. Now let's explore the fourth use of the word would, making polite requests. In this context, would is used to soften requests, making them more polite and considerate. For example, instead of saying, "I want to ask you a question," we would say, "I would like to ask you a question." This subtle change in wording adds to the politeness of the request. "Would you please pass the salt?" and "Would you mind passing the salt?" are much more polite ways of asking someone to pass the salt rather than, "Can you pass the salt?" Using would in polite requests is essential because it demonstrates respect and consideration for the other person. It shows that you value their assistance and cooperation and are mindful of their feelings. This is particularly important in formal and polite settings, such as professional environments or social settings with strangers that you may not know, as using polite language can help create positive impressions and foster better communication.
Using would as a polite request. Describe a situation where you had to ask someone for help, politely. As a sample answer, we could say, "Last week, I needed help with understanding a difficult concept in my math class. I approached my teacher after class and politely asked if she would be able to explain it to me again. Would be able. I thanked her for her time and assistance, and she kindly agreed to go over the topic with me."
Now let's take a look at the fifth way that we would use the word would, expressing conditionals. In this context, would is used to express hypothetical or unreal situations, often in conditional sentences. For example, consider the sentence, "If I were rich, I would buy a Ferrari." Here, the speaker is imagining a situation that is not true. They are not rich, and the corresponding action they would take, buying a Ferrari. In a similar sentence, "If I had finished my work, I would have left." The speaker is imagining a situation in the past that didn't happen. They didn't finish their work, and the action they would have taken if it had happened, they would have left. Another example is, "I would help you if I could." Here, the speaker is expressing a willingness to help, but they are unable to do so because they lack the ability. Additionally, consider the question, "What would you do if you could read people's minds?" The speaker is asking about a hypothetical, unrealistic ability, reading minds, and the action they would take if they possessed that ability. Remember, using the word would in conditionals helps us to express and explain ourselves in hypothetical situations. It explores different possibilities and scenarios that might come up in conversation while speaking or in writing. Demonstrating this proficiency in conditional sentences is crucial. Let's look into it just a bit further. In informal speech, native English speakers often give advice by using conditional statements. Without explicitly stating, "If I were you," they instead directly state their advice by using the word would or wouldn't. Instead of saying, "If I were you, I would buy a new laptop," many English speakers would simply say, "Hey, I would buy a new laptop." The speaker offers advice without explicitly mentioning the hypothetical scenario of being in the other person's shoes or being the other person. Similarly, instead of saying, "If I were you, I wouldn't drive to the city, I would take the subway," it's common just to hear, "I wouldn't drive to the city, I'd take the subway," providing advice without explicitly saying, "If I were you." It allows people to offer guidance and recommendations more naturally and efficiently.
Now using would as a conditional. Talk about a dream or goal you have and what you would do if you had the opportunity. As a sample answer, we could say, One of my biggest dreams is to travel around the world and experience different cultures. If I had the opportunity, I would visit countries like Japan, Italy, and Australia. I would immerse myself in the local customs, try new foods, and learn about the history and traditions of each place that I visit.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and tuning into the video. Even proper use of grammar on the Duolingo English Test can help boost your scores. And if you're interested in not falling into the trap of using the word very and finding more advanced vocabulary, check out this video right here.